All right, guys, got a pretty interesting topic to talk about with you today. So yesterday, while I was drafting a post that you'll see, I think in a couple days, on the blog, I noticed something that was really interesting. I was looking at a specific player for the 1908 Pittsburgh Pirates. And one of the things I found that was interesting is that, well, I'll show you here. I think that we often sort of misinterpret the way the history actually was, and we tend to take things, I think, for granted that you don't really take for granted. So we'll go ahead, take a look here at the screen. I'm actually going to make myself a little bit smaller here so we can see this full thing. If you look at the 1908 Pirates, you think that it was a pretty predictable thing. I mean, you had Tommy Leach at third base, Honus Wagner at short, and you know, some of these guys, Fred Clark in the outfield. Owen Wilson was pretty young, but it was in the outfield as well. Interestingly enough, 1908 is Owen Wilson's rookie year, but many people forget that. Wilson, of course, is known, for the few people who know this, as the man who holds the major league record for the most triples in a season. You look at this team and you think, oh, well, they probably had this going like this for a while. I mean, Tommy Leach, right, was on the Pirates for years and years and years, for example. But what you don't realize is that in 1907, the chief starting third baseman for the Pirates was not Tommy Leach. Leach went back to the outfield because he wanted to. Instead, they had this guy named Alan Stork. Now, Alan Stork, I don't have the time to quite get into this right now. Stork is an interesting guy. He decided to go to Harvard University after the Pirates were kind of knocked out of the pennant race in 1907. And because of his school commitments, he was not able to join the Pirates in 1908 until June. And so Stork ends up, he does end up playing for the Pirates, if we can find him here somewhere. Pretty sure he does, but yeah, there he is. He's listed here at first base, though he didn't really play first base the whole season, right? And so if you just look at this on Baseball Reference, you think, oh yeah, this guy had his first full season in 1907, and then something happened. Maybe he was injured or something like that in 1908, and that's what prevented him from playing full time. It's not true. He went to college is what happened. So some injury, right? He actually died kind of young. Might be interesting to get into this guy. He died at only age 25. There is this bio from the Sabre Bio Project, but like I said, we're not going to get too deep into this, other than to say that when you're looking at this team and trying to figure out why they were put together the way that they were, you have to remember stuff like that. So I found this while I was looking around. This is from the Pittsburgh Press, April 12th, 1908. And look at this here. Outlook is not reassuring with Wagner not on team. You might have forgotten this, right? I mentioned this. This was a couple months ago here on the channel, and I've also written about it as well. Honus Wagner did not start the 1908 season on the Pirates. He had threatened to retire and didn't come back until the season was 3 games old, and he had a contract that was rumored to be as much as $10,000 a year so that he could play. Of course, he played for many years afterwards. But Wagner, who had in 1908 probably the greatest season when adjusted for era and ballpark, if you trust how those adjustments work, like of all time, Wagner actually didn't start that season with the big team. Can you imagine that? It's incredible, right? If the Flying Dutchman adheres to his determination to quit the game for the season and Tommy Leach refuses to play in the infield, let me say again, Tommy Leach refuses to play in the infield, that would be this Tommy Leach. He was hoping to play in the outfield to do what? To have more space to work on his hitting. Does that sound familiar? Both of which propositions are considered by the players as more than probabilities. The Pirates will not look very formidable when they enter the pennant race at St. Louis next Tuesday. Now, the person who I was focusing on was this guy, Royal Shaw, also known as Hunky Shaw. He was full of promise in the first few days at West Baden, down in Alabama, Arkansas, down there somewhere. But he fell down woefully in subsequent practice. There are others who may develop into major league ball players, but a club which is making a serious bid for the championship cannot afford to experiment. This is the reason the youngsters are given their course in the minor ranks, right? Which is a pretty rough and harsh thing to say. There's a lot of really interesting things here in this article. And there's a lot of other interesting things in the coverage that this paper, the Pittsburgh Press, had. But it does say here really clearly what would solve the problem. Wagner back and Leach at third would solve all the present problems of the then last season. The infield would be composed of stars and would measure up favorably against any infield in professional baseball. But Leach is another stumbling block. Tommy Leach didn't want to play second base or third base, and so on and so forth. Let's see if we can find much more. Yeah, so in predicting here how the Pirates would be, There's another player that you forget about here. At short, Charlie Starr will play acceptably. He will be safe but not brilliant. His batting will be rather weak, his base running excellent. The weak spot is third base. Of course, there is a chance that Royal Shaw may develop more speed and accuracy and better hitting qualities than he has yet exhibited, but his work during the past 2 weeks has not been of a character that would justify Clark in retaining him at that corner, whatever that's supposed to mean. A good substitute, if the Pirate chief is called upon to play a substitute, will be Warren Gill, who not only plays a nice third, but also proved at Winfield that he is equally at home on the second sack. He's also been finding the ball with a greater degree of success in the past few days than heretofore. All in all, he's a very promising youngster and an excellent utility infielder. Yeah, Warren Gill is another interesting player. So Warren Gill does play for the Pirates in 1908. 29-year-old rookie, Warren Gill. Warren Gill hit 224. This plus 97 OPS, basically replacement level according to WAR. He never played again. And when we look at his fielding, he played where? At first base. There's all this talk about, oh, you could put him at second base, you could put him at third base. No, he played at first base. It's just so fascinating to look at this and to read about this and then to go look up what actually happened and realize that that's not really what happened. So there are three rookies that we mention here, right? One of them I've talked about again before, Charlie Starr, the player who keeps getting forgotten in the shadows of Honus Wagner. I guess technically he wasn't a rookie. He played in 1905 with the St. Louis Browns. I'm not sure how many people in 1908 remembered that. But I mean, he was like 29 when he started in 08, so 29, 30 years old, and was almost certainly not a major league caliber player. But you want to root for the guy, despite the 186 average. You do kind of want to root for him. His 0.4 career WAR. And so there's the other one. And then, of course, the one that is most interesting to me is this guy who we just talked about. Where are you? And, of course, this always seems to happen when you're in the middle of talking about it. You can't find him, probably because he's not listed. He wasn't actually a batter. There you are, Hunky Shaw. Hunky Shaw... I'm sorry, he was a batter. He was a pinch hitter. He never fielded in baseball. So the interesting thing about Hunky Shaw, right, is that this guy who has a baseball card, he was in the the T206 set on Providence, which is where he played after he played for the Pirates. Hunky Shaw will show up from time to time. Like if you're doing a replay, you'll have a card for him if you have a game that cards everybody. It'll be a bad card because he had one plate appearance in which he struck out, and that was it. And you'll look at the 1908 Pirates and you'll think things like I've thought, which is, wait, so who comes into play third base if the third baseman gets injured? I think we had that the other day. So if that happens to the Pirates in the replay, you have a problem because most games will not give Hunky Shaw a rating in the field, but he was really the backup third baseman. Or most games will look at Warren Gill and say, oh, this guy played first base. No, he actually played anywhere in the infield, right? That's one of the problems that you have, right? Which is that you don't really see all of this stuff happening here. It would be possible to go back and to create a game based upon a lot of the information that's actually in these old papers, but it would be extraordinarily time-consuming. And the reason why is because you have a whole bunch of articles like this to read, and then you've got to figure out what to do for for cities like Cleveland, where it's kind of hard to find papers that are easily accessible and easily searchable, and so on and so forth. So that's a little bit of insight into what was really going on back in 1908 when you're talking about like predictions about the teams and where players are going to play and stuff. This stuff over time has become more and more streamlined, so it's a lot more predictable. Back then, it wasn't predictable at all. And so this is where you have this thing where it's like, well, this guy could play here or there, and then he ends up doing something completely different in the majors. Really fascinating stuff when you think about what the Pirates could have been like. I mean, if Wagner had not gone back, I think it's likely that Leach would have stayed in the outfield instead of playing in the infield, and you would have had an infield made up of like three different rookies at the same time, and including players who in the end never really got much of a chance. So a lot of fascinating stuff. There's a couple other things here. It is true that there was general complaint of weakness in hot springs due to the hot baths, and the players were easily fatigued by the practice routine. Clark told the youngsters they would experience the benefits of the drips in the Vapor Valley after their departure, and his prediction has been verified. They've been constantly gaining strength, and so on and so forth. Now, that's the other thing that you forget when we talk about sort of the history of the reason why they do spring training and stuff. Part of it is because it's based upon this this really sort of old-fashioned belief from back then that the best way for these guys to get up to speed and to be able to be ready for the upcoming season was to like sweat a whole bunch down in the middle of nowhere in some relatively primitive place with very few people around, and to just get sick there, and that'll make your body stronger somehow or something. I don't know, it's really sort of strange way of thinking back then, but that's kind of what the game was like. So if you're going to go play, OOTP or whatever game to do your replay, and you're going to play with 1908, you have to keep this stuff in mind, right? I mean, there's like the way that we think about it and the stories that we have about Fred Merkel and about all this other stuff, but like the real 1908 season, when you really dig into it, is a lot more interesting than that. There's a lot of stuff going on that is a little bit surprising and that I think most people would sort of miss. Anyway, there you go. It's a little bit of insight into what I found. And the funny thing is that you could probably do this for all 16 teams in 1908 and realize that there's all sorts of weird things happening. What looks controlled is actually chaotic, and so on and so forth. It's great stuff, and it makes for fascinating reading. Anyway, I'll leave you with that and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.